20 child stars who vanished from Hollywood then and now. We loved seeing their faces on our TV sets and at the movies. Their smiles were on magazine covers, and their names were big deals all over America. But then, all of a sudden, they were gone. 30 child stars who once had everything. They were super famous names from Hollywood's best years. What really happened to these young, loved stars when the cameras stopped filming? Some of their stories might make you sad, while others might actually make you feel good about people again. Now, let's jump into these amazing stories one by one, starting with some of the most loved young performers from the 1930s through the 1970s. Number 1. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll wasn't just any kid actor. He was Disney's first kid star who got a contract. He was the voice of Peter Pan and the face of Treasure Island. He won a special Oscar for kids when he was only 12 for his acting in The Window, and So Dear to My Heart. It looked like his future was endless, but when he hit his teen years, things got tough for Bobby. His sweet, round face, which was his biggest tool, started to change. He got acne all over, and his face grew up. Walt Disney himself, who had treated Bobby like a son, suddenly fired him in 1953, only 3 years after he starred in the studio's real-life hit movie, Treasure Island. People inside the movie business said that Disney bosses claimed Bobby had become hard to work with, but the truth was much worse. He simply didn't look like the cute kid they wanted anymore. Disney dropped him and called him a has-been at 16. Bobby fell into a terrible problem with drugs and small crimes. His parents, who didn't know how to handle his problems, sent him to a rehab place. But it didn't help much. By his early 20s, he was deep into heroin addiction, arrested many times, and totally cut off from the movie world that had once cheered for him. The last part of Bobby's life is a total tragedy. In 1968, some kids playing in an empty apartment building in New York City found the body of a man. Since he had no ID, he was buried in a poor person's grave without a name on Hart Island. Almost 2 years later, his mother, who hadn't heard from her son, asked the police to look into his disappearance again. Fingerprints proved the sad truth. The body no one claimed was Bobby Driscoll. He died at age 31 from heart problems caused by his longtime drug use. The boy who once flew as Peter Pan ended his life alone, forgotten, and no one knew who he was. This is maybe the cruelest twist for a life that started with such big hopes. Number 2. Margaret O'Brien. Unlike Bobby's sad story, Margaret O'Brien's story turns out much better. When she was a kid, she amazed people with how deeply emotional she was in movies like Meet Me in St. Louis with Judy Garland. Her acting as Tootie Smith won her a special Oscar for kids, and her ability to cry right when she was supposed to made her one of the most valuable child stars at MGM. By the early 1950s, though, Margaret's career slowed way down. Switching from an adorable kid to a teenager was tough, and she didn't get many roles. Instead of running after the few chances she had, Margaret made a big choice to walk away from the Hollywood spotlight. What happened next is not the usual story for a child star. Margaret put her energy into school and having a normal life. She got married and focused on her family, showing up sometimes on TV and in plays, but never trying to become that huge star again. Today, at 87 years old, Margaret O'Brien lives a calm life in California. Unlike many people her age, she managed her money well and is one of the few living connections to Hollywood's best years. She sometimes goes to film festivals and classic movie events, where fans are happy to see that she still has the same kind heart and warm smile that made people love her more than 80 years ago. Margaret choosing to leave Hollywood on her own terms, instead of being forced out because people's tastes changed, or she wasn't popular anymore, shows a different path for child stars. A quiet, dignified exit instead of a painful push-out. Number 3. Claude Jarman. When the movie The Yearling came out in 1946, Critics and audiences were blown away by the natural acting of 12-year-old Claude Jarman Jr., who played Jody Baxter. His real-feeling performance as a boy and his pet deer in the countryside of Florida won him an Oscar for Kids and seemed to promise a long, big movie career. But by the early 1950s, Claude's name disappeared from the movie ads, and his face was gone from the screens. What happened to this talented young actor who had worked with famous people like Gregory Peck and Jane Wyman? Unlike many kid stars who were pushed out of the business, Claude made the unusual choice to leave Hollywood by himself. As a teenager, he realized that getting an education would be more stable than the changing movie business. After being in interesting but less popular movies, like Intruder in the Dust, Claude chose to go back to his home state of Tennessee to finish high school with regular friends instead of on movie sets. After graduating, Claude went to Vanderbilt University instead of looking for acting jobs to restart his career. He served in the Navy before finally settling down in San Francisco, where he took a job far from the Hollywood cameras as the boss of the San Francisco International Film Festival for 15 years. Today, at 89, Claude Jarman Jr. is living a happy life with his family, sometimes giving interviews about the small but important part he played in movie history. His choice to care more about school and a normal life than fame is the opposite of the peers who desperately held on to their acting careers past their best years, often with very bad results. Number 4. Deanna Durbin. Not many child stars got as famous around the world as Deanna Durbin did in the late 1930s and early 1940s. Her beautiful singing voice and her good girl image made her one of Universal Studios' most profitable stars. People say she saved the studio from going broke. She was so popular that a fan club dedicated to her had more members than any other star at the time. By age 21, Deanna was the second highest paid woman in America, only behind Bette Davis, earning $400,000 per movie. Yet at the very top of her career, Deanna made a shocking announcement that surprised Hollywood and broke millions of fans' hearts. At just 27 years old, she was retiring from movies completely. Unlike other stars who were pushed out by changing tastes or getting older, Deanna walked away from a contract that paid her $200,000 a year, voluntarily giving up a career that others would have loved to have. In 1949, after finishing her 21st movie, For the Love of Mary, Deanna Durbin simply vanished from public life. She moved to a small town outside Paris, France, married her third husband, producer Charles David, and for the next 64 years of her life, she almost never gave interviews and said no to every offer to come back to performing. She disappeared so completely that many younger Americans have never even heard her name, even though she was once one of the most famous women in the world. When asked years later about why she decided to quit, Deanna said something rare. "I was never happy in Hollywood. I couldn't handle the fake life I was expected to live." She explained that the made-up image of the perfect girl next door felt like it was suffocating her, and no amount of money was worth losing her privacy and her real self. Deanna lived quietly in France until she died in 2013 at age 91, always saying no to every attempt to get her back into the spotlight. Her intentional choice to walk away from fame and fortune is perhaps the most dramatic time a celebrity has made themselves disappear in Hollywood history. Number 5. Brandon DeWilde. With his blonde hair and bright blue eyes, Brandon DeWilde won hearts in Shane, 1953, saying the famous line, "Shane, come back," which is still famous in movie history. His acting won him an Academy Award nomination when he was only 11 years old, making him one of the youngest nominees ever. Unlike many kid actors who have trouble finding adult jobs, Brandon successfully moved on to teenage roles in movies like HUD with Paul Newman and TV shows including The Virginian. His talent seemed to promise a long, successful career as an adult actor. But life had other plans for Brandon. In July 1972, while driving near Denver, Colorado, he lost control of his car and hit a construction truck. At just 30 years old, Brandon DeWild's promising life was suddenly and tragically ended. The boy who had once called for Shane to come back would never return to the screen himself. His death at such a young age left fans wondering about all the great things he could have done. Critics thought Brandon had the talent and range to become one of the best character actors of his time. Instead, his list of movies is frozen at just 17 films, a small but important legacy. Brandon's story reminds us that life is fragile and how quickly successful careers can be stopped. Even though it wasn't a disappearance by choice, his early death took him out of Hollywood's group of stars, just as he was getting into what should have been his best years as an actor. Number 6. Shirley Temple. Of course, we have to talk about Shirley Temple, the most famous kid actor in Hollywood history. With her bouncy curls and sweet dimples, she alone cheered up Americans during the Great Depression. By age 7, she was earning $50,000 per movie, which is almost $1 million today. And her products, from dolls to clothes, made millions more. But even Shirley Temple, the brightest star among all the kid actors, faced the harsh reality of Hollywood. Children grow up. As she became a teenager, people stopped going to her movies. 20th Century Fox, the studio that had made a lot of money from her as a kid, canceled her contract when she turned 12. After a few tries at teenage roles that didn't work, including a screen test for The Wizard of Oz that failed, Shirley retired from films at the very young age of 22. But unlike many former kid stars who vanished or struggled with losing fame, Shirley Temple Black, as she was known after getting married, created one of the most successful second careers in American public life. After raising her children, she went into politics, running for Congress without success, before being chosen as a UN representative in 1969. Her work as a diplomat did very well. She became the U.S. ambassador to Ghana and later to Czechoslovakia, proving her talents were much bigger than cute smiles and tap dancing. Shirley kept a classy public life, rarely showing any sadness about her big fall from Hollywood's top. When asked about her amazing journey from child star to diplomat, she once said, "I have one piece of advice for those who want to become actors. Don't." Her later career in public service until her death in 2010 showed that leaving the Hollywood spotlight didn't mean you disappeared from helping society in a meaningful way. That's a great lesson for the child stars who came after her. Number 7. Tommy Rhett Egg. For millions of Americans who grew up in the 1950s, Tommy Rettig was simply Jeff Miller, the first boy who owned the famous dog in the Lassie TV show. With his perfect American looks and natural connection with the dog star, Tommy became a famous name and one of the most recognizable kid actors of his time. But Tommy's feelings about fame were confusing. By 14, he felt more and more uncomfortable with being a celebrity and how it stopped him from growing up normally. In a decision that shocked the producers, he asked to be let go from his Lassie contract, walking away from what many thought was a dream job. Life after Lassie turned out to be hard. Like many kid actors, Tommy found that casting directors had a hard time seeing him as anything other than the boy with the famous dog. Roles became hard to find, and by his late teens, Tommy had mostly disappeared from TV and movies. His adult years were rocky. In the 1960s, he was arrested for growing marijuana, a conviction that further hurt his chances of getting his acting career back. Struggling to figure out his life, Tommy went through different jobs, from farmhand to computer programmer. Funny enough, it was in this second career that Tommy finally found happiness after fame. He became an early expert in database programming and made a name for himself as a respected software consultant and writer of programming books. A career about as far from Hollywood as you could imagine. Tommy died at age 54 in 1996, having lived a life of major changes. Number 8. Diana Sarah Carey, Baby Peggy. Long before Shirley Temple's curls were on screen, there was Baby Peggy, one of the very first child stars of silent movies. Between 1921 and 1924, This tiny performer made over 150 short films and several big movies, becoming a worldwide sensation before she turned 6 years old. With her classic bowl haircut and serious look, she entertained audiences with her ability to copy adult stars like Rudolph Valentino and Pola Negri. At the peak of her fame, Baby Peggy earned an unbelievable $1.5 million a year, which is about $23 million today. She supported her whole extended family and received over 1.7 million fan letters. These numbers would be impressive for any star, let alone a kindergartner. But Baby Peggy's stardom came at a terrible cost. Her father, a former cowboy with connections in Hollywood, controlled her career tightly, forcing her to work up to 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. She got no education, had no friends her own age, and never saw a penny of the huge amounts she earned. When she would cry on set from being so tired, crew members would hold an ice cube to her face until she stopped. By 1925, her career had fallen apart because of her father's fights with producers and his bad handling of her money. The family's fortune disappeared almost overnight because of bad investments and wild spending. By age 7, Baby Peggy was a has-been, before most kids even start first grade. The family's money problems forced her back to work in vaudeville, stage shows, where she toured constantly until the Great Depression ended that work too. By her teenage years, her identity as Baby Peggy was such a problem that she legally changed her name to Diana Sarah Carey, trying to get away from her childhood where she was taken advantage of. Diana spent decades mostly not famous, working regular jobs and struggling to understew. And what happened to her amazing childhood? It wasn't until she was in her 70s that movie experts realized how important she was to movie history, and she started talking in public about how kid actors were exploited in early Hollywood. She lived to the incredible age of 101, passing away in 2020 as the last major star left from the silent movie era. In her later years, Diana became an author and a fighter for child actors' rights, turning her painful experiences into a power for good change. The girl who had once been world famous as Baby Peggy finally found her most important role as Diana Sarah Carey, historian, author, and voice for those who were taken advantage of by the entertainment world. Number 9. Scotty Beckett. With his famous sideways newsboy cap and naughty grin, Scotty Beckett charmed audiences as one of the original Little Rascals in the Our Gang comedies. Later, he successfully moved on to big movies, playing the younger versions of stars like Frederick March and Spencer Tracy, even showing up as the young Al Jolson in The Jolson Story. Scotty's early career seemed lucky. He worked all the time throughout the 1930s and 1940s, avoiding the sudden job loss that happened to many kid actors. As a teenager, he even got a regular role in the popular Rocky Jones Space Ranger TV show, suggesting he might be one of the rare kid performers to successfully become an adult actor. But behind Scotty's happy on-screen face, there were growing personal problems. His father's death when Scotty was 14 sent him into a bad emotional time that he never fully recovered from. In his late teens, he started a pattern of hurting himself, drinking heavily, misusing medication, and getting into more and more unstable public events. His spiral downward sped up in the 1950s. Many marriages ended in divorce. Arrests for drunk driving and writing bad checks piled up, and his once promising career fell apart. By the late 1950s, Scotty couldn't get a job in Hollywood. His reputation was totally destroyed by his unpredictable behavior and legal issues. The last part of Scotty's life is a warning story from Hollywood. In May 1968, he checked into a nursing home after a severe beating. No one really knows the details. 2 days later, he was found dead in his room at age 38, reportedly from taking too many sleeping pills. The official cause was listed as likely suicide, though questions about what exactly happened continue today. The difference between the happy boy in the cap who delighted audiences during the Depression and the troubled man who died alone and almost forgot it, and shows perhaps the darkest possible result of becoming famous too early. Scotty Beckett's promising life, which began with so much laughter and opportunity, ended in tragedy before he turned 40, a tough reminder of the people fame can destroy. Number 10. Freddie Bartholomew. In the 1930s, no kid star could match Freddie Bartholomew's elegance and serious acting skill. With his British accent, perfect manners, and amazing way of showing emotion. He became MGM's answer to Fox's Shirley Temple, starring in book adaptations like David Copperfield, Little Lord Fauntleroy, and Captains Courageous. At his best, Freddie earned $2,500 per week, a huge amount of money during the Great Depression. His polished acting and proper behavior made him Hollywood's perfect image of the proper English schoolboy, even though his real childhood had been far from easy. Behind Freddie's success was a painful family drama. Born in London to poor parents, he was sent to live with an aunt who saw his talent and brought him to America. When his movie career took off, his biological parents suddenly showed up again, starting a bitter and very public custody fight, mostly because they wanted his earnings. The money spent on lawyers for these family disputes ate up most of Freddie's fortune. By the time he became a teenager, changing audience tastes and his changing looks made him harder to cast. The boy, who had once been MGM's favorite star, found himself dropped by the studio at age 14 when his contract ended. Unlike many former child stars, Freddie handled his career decline with amazing dignity. After serving in the Air Force during World War II, he completely reinvented himself, moving into television advertising. Starting as a salesman, he eventually worked his way up to become an executive and an award-winning director of TV commercials in New York. Freddie rarely talked about his movie career in his adult years, preferring to be judged on his success in advertising rather than his childhood performances. When he died in 1992 at age 67, many of his advertising co-workers were surprised to learn that the respected executive among the Kid had once been one of Hollywood's most famous children. His successful second career and the classy way he handled leaving fame offer a perfect example of keeping grace under pressure that few former child stars have managed to follow. Number 11. Jackie Coogan. Jackie Coogan holds the honor of being Hollywood's first major child star. After Charlie Chaplin saw the 7-year-old performing in a stage show, he cast him as his co-star in The Kid, 1921, where Jackie's natural ability to show emotion made him an instant sensation. His heartbreaking performance as the abandoned child taken in by Chaplin's character showed a deep emotion rarely seen in actors of any age. Jackie's fame quickly reached incredible levels. His face was on toys, clothes, and food products worldwide. His bowl haircut became a popular look for boys all across America. By age 10, he had earned around $4 million, which is about $60 million today, a fortune made entirely by his amazing acting talent. But Jackie would never get to enjoy the wealth he created. When he turned 21 and expected to get his earnings, he discovered a terrible truth. His mother and stepfather had spent almost all of his fortune on fancy living, diamond rings, expensive cars, and luxury homes. Out of the millions he had earned, only $126,000 was left. Jackie's subsequent legal fight against his own mother became news all over the country. Even though he eventually only got a small piece of his earnings, his public struggle led directly to the 1939 passing of the California Child Actors Bill, commonly called the Coogan Law, which requires that a portion of kid performers' earnings be saved in protected bank accounts. While Jackie kept acting as an adult, he never got back his childhood fame. Later generations knew him mostly as Uncle Fester in the 1960s TV show The Addams Family, a role very different from the sensitive child who had once moved audiences to tears next to Chaplin. Jackie's importance is less in his adult career than in the legal protections his personal tragedy created for future generations of kid performers. Every young actor who benefits from financial safeguards owes a thank you to the boy whose exploitation led to this change. Number 12. Beverly Washburn. With her expressive eyes and natural, honest way, Beverly Washburn became one of the most sought-after child actresses of the 1950s. Even though she never became as famous as some of her peers, TV viewers saw her often on shows like The Lone Ranger, Dragnet, and Leave It to Beaver. Movie audiences knew her from films such as Shane and Old Yeller. Beverly's ability to play different kinds of roles kept her working constantly throughout her childhood and into her teens. This was a big success when many young performers struggled to move past their cute kid roles. Directors valued her ability to cry convincingly right when they needed her to, often casting her in roles that needed emotional openness. Unlike the sad paths of many former child stars, Beverly handled her change from child performer to adult with relative stability. Even though big starring roles didn't come her way as she grew up, she kept finding work in TV and movies well into the 1970s, slowly moving to smaller parts and occasional appearances. When acting opportunities finally slowed down, Beverly made a graceful exit from Hollywood, focusing on her family life and occasional fan conventions, where her work in loved films like Old Yeller still brings her affection from fans of classic movies. Today, at 81, Beverly Washburn lives quietly in Las Vegas, sometimes appearing at film festivals and writing about her experiences in Hollywood's best years. Her memoir, Real Tears, gives an insider's view on child acting in the 1950s without the dramatic, bitter tone that often marks these kinds of stories. Beverly represents the middle way for former child actors. Not a tragic victim, nor an extraordinary success story. Her career shows how a young performer could work a lot, step away smoothly when the time came, and build a satisfying life away from the camera's focus. Number 13. June Lockhart. While many might not immediately call June Lockhart a child star who vanished, her career path shows an important different type of story for a child actor. Starting her movie career at age 13 in A Christmas Carol, 1938, alongside her parents, both established actors, June successfully managed the difficult move from child performer to adult actress, a path where many of her peers stumbled. After appearing in movies throughout her teen years, including the memorable Meet Me in St. Louis, June found her greatest fame on TV as an adult, playing motherly figures in iconic series like Lassie and Lost in Space. Her change from a child performer to a loved TV mom is rare in Hollywood. She had lasting success over many parts of her life. At 99 years old, June Lockhart remains one of the last living connections to Hollywood's best years. She occasionally makes public appearances and shares stories from her remarkable 9-decade career in entertainment. Her success in avoiding the problems that hurt many young performers offers a hopeful contrast to the sadder stories that often dominate talks about former child stars. Number 14. Gloria Jean. With her soprano voice and sweet appeal, Gloria Jean was briefly set up to possibly take over as Universal Studios' singing sensation after Deanna Durbin. After making her movie debut in The Underpup, 1939, Gloria appeared in a series of musical films designed to show off her great singing talents, including several movies with comedy star Donald O'Connor. Despite being in over 20 films before she turned 21, Gloria's career began to slow down in the late 1940s, as people's movie tastes changed and moved away from the innocent musical comedies that were her specialty. Universal chose not to renew her contract, and later roles at smaller studios failed to get her career going again. Unlike many performers who desperately held on to their fading fame, Gloria made a clear choice about her future and chose stability over the uncertainty of trying to chase a less successful Hollywood career. By the early 1950s, she had left entertainment completely, taking a job as a hostess for Redken Laboratories and later working as an executive receptionist. Gloria lived comfortably in her post-fame decades, raising her son and keeping private connections with a few Hollywood friends while building a life totally removed from her earlier celebrity. When interviewed years later about her decision to leave entertainment, she showed no regrets, noting practically that when the time came to move on, "I moved on." Her death in 2018 at age 92 got little media attention, which shows how completely she had stepped away from public life. Gloria Jean's graceful exit from fame is a great example of how a short time in the spotlight doesn't have to define your whole life. Number 15. Kevin Corcoran. Disney fans of the 1950s and 1960s instantly recognized Kevin Corcoran as Moochie, the perfect all-American boy who appeared in many Disney projects, including the Spin and Marty segments on the Mickey Mouse Club, and films like Old Yeller, The Shaggy Dog, and Swiss Family Robinson. With his freckled face and playful energy, Kevin was the model of the idealized American boy after the war. Walt Disney himself took a personal interest in his career, casting him repeatedly and helping create his public image as the classic kid brother character. Unlike many child stars who struggle with becoming adults, Kevin realized early on that his future might be behind the camera rather than in front of it. After studying theater arts at California State University, he made a successful change to assistant directing and producing, working on shows like Quantum Leap, Baywatch, and Murder, She Wrote. Kevin's career behind the scenes actually lasted longer and was more constantly successful than his acting career, which is rare among former kid performers. His understanding of what happens on set, learned from his own experiences as a young actor, made him especially good when directing child performers later in his career. When Kevin passed away from colorectal cancer in 2015, at age 66, he left behind a legacy of professionalism in two distinct Hollywood careers. First as Disney's reliable child star, then as a respected TV producer and director. His successful move from one side of the camera to the other shows a flexibility that many former child performers lack. Number 16. John Provost. When John Provost joined the cast of Lassie in 1957 as Timmy Martin, he stepped into what would become one of the most recognizable child roles in TV history. For 7 years, his adventures with the famous dog kept audiences around the world captivated, making his face one of the most recognized in America. At the most popular time of the show, John received more than 2,000 fan letters every week. His blonde hair and innocent expressions became symbols of the wholesome family entertainment that defined much of 1950s television. Unlike his Lassie predecessor, Tommy Rettig, John left the series because everyone agreed it was time, rather than because of a fight. At age 14, feeling he had outgrown the role of the always young Timmy, John and his parents decided not to renew his contract. The character of Timmy and his family were written off the show by having them move to Australia, notably taking Lassie with them. Though the collie would conveniently find her way back to America for the series to continue with new human co-stars. After Lassie, John faced the typical problems of a former child star. A few roles in film and TV followed, but nothing came close to his earlier fame. Instead of chasing acting jobs that were becoming less and less successful, John eventually chose to step away from Hollywood completely. After attending college, John built a successful career in real estate development in Northern California, about as far from the entertainment industry as you could get. While staying in the state, he got married, raised children, and created a life far removed from his days of on-screen adventures with television's most famous dog. Today, at 74, John Provost has come to terms with his unique place in TV history.